Hello, YouTube. Sidekick here with a little video about finding your first module in DCS. It turns out that this is one of the most searched for questions on YouTube. It's also a question on which there are many opinions, pretty much as many opinions as there are players. So if you're interested in the answer to that question, because you're interested in DCS and you're trying to get started, then listen on. And if you are one of those players that has one of those many opinions, then listen on and add your own contribution in the comments, or come on by my Discord channel and join the discussion. So I'm going to add my opinion to the mix. And of course, the first and shortest answer to the question, what airplane should I buy as my first aircraft in DCS, is, well, it depends. Which is a short answer, but it's not very helpful. Because, of course, the next question is, well, what does it depend on? And that's really kind of where things start to get interesting, and kind of where I started trying to put together this video. So I tried to come up with a list of, fairly short list of questions that will hopefully help point us in the direction of a helpful answer to the question of what plane it is that you want to start with. So I'm going to list the questions here. They all have two answers, A or B. Trying to remember whether you answer A or B. It'll be important later. You'll see what I mean. So here are the questions you need to ask yourself when you're thinking of starting, of buying your first DCS aircraft. So the first one is really about you and the way that you approach DCS. So the first question is, why did you pick DCS? Answer A, well, because it seems like a fun game. Or answer B, because I heard it was a great simulation. So which one of those would be closer to your preference? The second question under this heading to ask yourself is, what's your style? And A would be, you like playing online, multiplayer with your friends, maybe meeting new ones. Answer B would be solo play. You like learning new stuff. You don't want to jump into multiplayer until you know more and you feel competent. Okay, those are the first two questions. Second question, or third question, I mean. How much flight sim experience or real world flying experience do you have? Answer A would be not much. What you do have is in console type games like War Thunder or Ace Combat, but nothing that really approximates real flying. Answer B would be quite a bit. You've always been interested in flying, played flight simulators for years, you're quite comfortable in a simulated cockpit. Fourth question, again about yourself. I call this the hey boomer question. Basically, how old are you? And if you answer A, if you are under 45, B, if you're over 45. Trust me, it matters. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the next question is sort of how big is your rig and how deep is your wallet? By which I mean actually your flight simulator control setup, not the quality of your computer, but just the controls that you're planning to use to fly with. Answer A is pretty basic: a game controller, keyboard and mouse, maybe a simple joystick, or even a basic HOTAS, and you're not really planning on spending a lot of hard-earned cash on improving that. Answer B would be that you have or want to get a prosumer setup, including rudder pedals, something like a Thrustmaster Warthog or something from Winwig or VKB, and that you do expect to put some time and money into improving your simulated cockpit setup. Okay, so those are the basic questions. There's one more question that will affect what kind of aircraft you want to buy, and that is basically, are you a ground pounder or an ace fighter jock? By which I mean, do you prefer and are you interested in doing air-to-ground missions where you're mostly attacking targets on the ground, or are you in this for fighting other planes and other players in air-to-air combat? That's important. Okay, so remember the answers while I explain a couple of other things here. First of all, you should all know my reviewer's tilt. I am pretty much solidly B in all of those questions categories above, and I'm also a ground pounder. That's where I come from, and that's why I play DCS. Now, let's talk about what's available, and then also trying to narrow the choices down a bit so we can use the questions to pick between a short list. Now, there really is an embarrassment of riches here, from early warbirds to modern jets, from props to rotors to afterburners. Eagle Dynamics has done a very good job of providing you with options to make the entry pretty easy. You get a discount on your first module, and you can pretty much try anything you like for 2 weeks, at least once a year. And they also provide free modules along with the free download. You can actually jump right in the cockpit as soon as you download the sim. So obviously, the first thing you should do is to download DCS, try one of the free modules to figure out, things like whether or not you even have a system that will provide you with a decent experience playing the game, and at least to sort of just get oriented to the way the game works. Now, you should be aware, though, that the free modules are quite different than the paid modules, and you should be careful about judging the DCS book by those two covers. The first major difference is that the SU-25T does not feature a clickable cockpit, which really is a pretty big deal, actually. To fly the 25T, you either have to take the time to set up your controllers with a bunch of bindings, or you have to remember a bunch of hotkey strokes. This is, honestly, a lot more work than for many modules, because in a clickable cockpit, you'll spend more time finding the switch in the cockpit than finding the hotkey on your keyboard, and that is a much more satisfying experience by and large. Or at least, if you don't find it to be so, you probably won't enjoy DCS, or at least you won't take advantage of the things that DCS puts a lot of focus on. So if you're not really going to be interested in the clickable cockpits, that's maybe a sign that the DCS may not be the most enjoyable experience for you. Assuming it is, though, you will find the free modules pretty unsatisfying, and also not really very representative of the DCS experience. The free modules have a couple of other limitations. The F-51 module has no armament, and so while it will allow you to fly, it won't allow you to engage in digital combat, so it's not really representative of the heart of the digital combat system experience. Now, the SU or Su-25T also has some pretty significant drawbacks. First of all, it's not all that easy to fly, and it appeals to a pretty niche audience. You have to like flying low and slow and looking for ground targets if you want to enjoy flying the 25T. It also helps if you were not raised in the West. The 25T is a Soviet design, and its weapons and systems may be familiar to anyone from Russia or Eastern Europe, but they will likely be pretty foreign to anyone from US or NATO or any country that mostly uses US or NATO style military hardware. Now, this isn't a huge deal, but it does hinder your familiarization because you may not recognize the names of the weapons or the systems on the aircraft from anything you've heard or read. And believe me, it will make it harder to get into this game, because it was for me, and I know a lot about aircraft, a lot about flying, but I didn't know very much about Russian aircraft. So I do think that if your initial trial with DC is successful, if it will run, if it looks interesting, you should consider moving on to another module fairly quickly to get the most out of DCS. Now, if cost is a major object, you have two choices. The first, honestly, is to download the A4E. It's full-featured, clickable cockpit model, and it is free, F-R-E-E-E-E-E. It is also one of my favorite modules, so I'm biased. Now, the A4 may not be for everyone for reasons I'll talk about later, but the other low-cost option is to purchase the Flaming Cliffs module, which will give you access to a variety of low-fidelity, non-clickable cockpit aircraft. Again, if you're really on the fence about DCS and you don't want to spend a lot of money, this may be a good place to start, but because the aircraft are low fidelity and non-clickable, you will find that there are significant differences between them and the later modules. You'll also find that they're not very popular with experienced players, so if you really want to board the DCS train, you'll probably want to find a full-featured module at some point once you've decided to take the plunge. Now, the A4 is free, and it does qualify on all of those categories, by the way. Okay, now, I'm going to whittle down the available choices based on my feelings on the matter. Some folks may well disagree, and I'm quite happy to have constructive comments on the subject, but this is my hot take on what not to include in the shortlist and why. First of all, as much as it pains me to say it, I would avoid any of the DCS warbirds right out of the gate, unless you are already a fairly accomplished sim pilot with some time in high-fidelity flight models of World War II aircraft. If that's why you came to DCS because that's what you want, go ahead and start there. But if you don't have a lot of experience with them, They will be a frustrating place to start. Now, they're very high quality and by and large, but they are also a real handful to fly and can be more than a little frustrating, especially if you don't have rudder pedals and you don't have a desire to learn how to manage a big, powerful piston engine. And don't get me wrong, there are some great planes there, but I wouldn't start there in DCS unless that's why you came here. Second of all, I would avoid any of the really niche planes, meaning the ones that have very particular features or qualities. Again, there are some fantastic choices out there once you're really sure that you love DCS. But again, I don't think they're a really good way to get started. Again, unless you came here for DCS for one of those particular aircraft, like the Harrier, for instance, because you really wanted to fly a high fidelity model of a V-style aircraft, if that's why you're here, go ahead and start with the Harrier. I wouldn't start there if you're just looking for a more general experience to begin with. I'd also include the F-14 in this category. It's a fantastic module, but the F-14 is really all about carrier ops and it has some very unique features that take a long time to get used to, and which, like the Harrier, are hard to get the most out of it unless you have a basic grounding in the way DCS works and certainly in the way sim flying works. I'd put the Viggen in this category as well. Again, it's a truly amazing module, but one that just does many, many things differently than pretty much every other aircraft. Again, it's a great second choice, but it isn't where I would start. The F-15E, similarly to the F-14. To get the most out of this incredibly detailed simulation, I think you really want a grounding in something that's a little less particular, and you probably also want the chance to fly with someone else who wants to fly in the back seat. That's the way to get the most out of the F-15E. I'd probably also put the A-10C and C2 in this category, I think. I mean, if you're truly a mud mover to your core and you love the hog, then go ahead and get it. But again, it has a number of features, including the way it flies, that are quite unique and different than just about all other modules. So I wouldn't start with any of those. I would certainly look at them for a second aircraft, but it's not where I would start. I'm also going to suggest that I would not start with some of the modules that are not all that niche, but that are a bit more fringe to DCS, mostly, again, because they fly differently than a lot of the other modules, and also because they're less, well supported online in terms of servers and also in terms of a community to help you learn them. These choices to exclude from the short list may be more controversial, but here again, I'd include the early Cold War jets like the F-86, MiG-15, MiG-19, MiG-21. Again, these are great modules, but like a lot of aircraft from this area, they're pretty particular. They have to be flown in a particular way, and they take a while to learn, and they're not all that well supported online, I don't think. I would also, with some hesitation, because it won't be popular, put both of the Mirages, the F1 and the 2000, in this category. Again, they're both fine modules, and if you're really interested in either one in particular, they're excellent choices. But again, they both have some idiosyncrasies in terms of flight models and systems that I don't think I'd recommend them as a first plane for players new to DCS, although the 2000 is probably a better choice than the F1. The F1, generally, again, I just think it's too unique to be the thing that you want to start with. Okay, so that helps narrow down the field a bit. Those are all the ones that, again, I'm not taking anything away from those aircraft. Please, if you're a fanboy of any of them, don't think that I'm trying to criticize them or say they're not great. It's just knowing that someone that hasn't really got a lot of experience in DCS or even in flying in a simulator, I just don't think they're a good place to start. So I'm going to narrow the choices down to 4 aircraft, and then I'm going to consider them in light of the questions I asked at the start of the video. And now the 4 aircraft that I'm going to choose between are the F-16, the FA-18, the A-4E, and the F-5E. Yes, long-time listeners, you heard that one right. Pick your jaws up off the floor, wipe the smug looks off your faces, and listen up. So here's my advice on the first jet you should select when you really decide you want to get into DCS. First, answer the questions at the start of this video. Pay attention to whether you mainly chose A or B. If you answered mostly A to most of the questions, then I'm going to say you'll be interested in one of the modern jets, and I would direct you to either the F-16 or the F-18. Now, both can do both missions in air-to-air and air-to-ground. And a while back, I would have said that the 18 had an edge in air-to-ground and the 16 in air-to-air. I'm not sure that's true anymore. I'll be honest, I don't actually own the F-16, mostly because I own the F-18. And I don't even fly that all that much anymore. They're both solidly multi-role aircraft. They really can do just about anything. They feature fully digital displays, and they can both deploy a massive variety of modern weapons. They do fly differently, but they are relatively easy to fly, at least in the middle of their performance envelopes, and they are frankly designed that way. They're designed to free pilots' mental bandwidth up to operate their sophisticated sensors and weapon systems rather than being focused on flying at all times. They are also fairly easy to get into, but they are also very deep as simulations go, and you'll be kept busy for a long time learning about all the things they can do and learning how to do them well, if that's what you want to do. Now, they are also, almost without a doubt, the two most popular aircraft in DCS, so you'll never lack for servers that feature them or players online with whom to fly. If you want to fly the best dogfighting aircraft of the modern era and you're an Air Force person, pick the F-16. If you really want to take a trip to the boat and want to someday be a Top Gun, then pick the F-18. I don't think either one will be a mistake if you are a Category A person. Now, if on the other hand you answered most of the questions with a B, well, then I think you should consider either the A4 or the F5. Now, the A4 is your choice if you're interested in moving mud, and the F5 is your choice if you want to learn the fine art of air combat maneuvering. I recommend these modules for those who are interested in really exploring DCS as a simulation, especially a historical simulation, and who are mostly focused on the solo experience. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The first being that they're much easier to learn in detail because they're much simpler than the modern jets. By that, I mean they have far fewer systems to learn so that you can spend your time learning the ones that are available in some detail. They will also both repay patient attention to detail and repetitive practice. While they're pretty easy to climb into, getting the most out of them requires practice and patience. And if that's how you approach life, this is where you want to start. Unlike the F-16 and the F-18, these jets don't allow you to automate a lot of tasks. They don't have fly-by-wire logic, so you will need to pay more attention and synchronize your hands and feet more, especially at the edges of the flight envelope. And by the way, both of these aircraft tend to need to be landed at the edge of their flight envelope. They're not massively difficult to fly, but they do require some practice just to fly well, or even competently. So they're a good choice if you already have some flight sim experience, particularly if that experience is in warbirds. The A4 and the F5 are both jets, and you'll know it as soon as you sit in them, but they are jets that need to be flown, not platforms that need to be operated. Now, if you really want the jet jock experience, go with the F5. It really does fly like what you think a fast modern jet fighter should fly like. It climbs well, accelerates quickly, and will do just about anything that you ask it to pretty effortlessly. The only exception to this rule would be fly slowly. It doesn't do that easily. Think about what that means for landing. And it also doesn't carry a lot of ordnance, and it won't land on an aircraft carrier. The A4, on the other hand, is both incredibly nimble and agile. It's a scooter, but it's also a bomb truck par excellence. Now, unloaded, with no ordnance on board, it's pretty easy to throw all over the sky, and its roll rate really does have to be experienced to be believed. That being said, it has no afterburner, and it really isn't much of a speed demon. It takes a while to get to altitude and a while to get up to speed. And once loaded, it is much less agile, but it will carry a huge bomb load, and as a tribute to the developers, it really will fly like a totally different aircraft when it's heavily loaded, which, if you're really interested in simulating the experience of modern air combat, kinda does matter. And it will also land and take off from a carrier. Landing, in particular, is a task that will take practice, but which will be immensely satisfying when you gain competence and confidence doing it. So I think both jets are pretty well supported online. You'll find other players on other servers that feature them. My guess, though, is that if you are a B-type, that you will find a lot of kindred spirits in these modules. Both the F5 and the A4 are also good places to start if you expect to start slowly in DCS and work your way up. They're both good trainers. In fact, both were used in that role in real life. Well, the T28 version of the F5 was and still is. They will provide a good platform on which to gain some aforementioned confidence and competence before moving on to other challenges. Now, granted, the A4 is not an official module, and that does put some players, especially new players, off. I can understand that, but seriously, it's just not an issue. If you follow the well laid out instructions, you will not break anything, and the A4 is very well supported through its Discord channel online. Okay, those are the answers if the answer was easy. If you're a solidly A person or a solidly B person, I think it's pretty easy to divide. But if your original answers are a bit more mixed, it's going to be a bit more of a toss-up. If you're a child of the 80s or later, looking for an online gaming experience, but without a lot of sim experience, or the resources to build yourself the rig of your dreams, the choice is a bit more complicated. I mean, the modern jets are pretty easy to fly, and if you are a digital native, you'll be right at home in the cockpit. They are the most popular modules, and they are everywhere online and in various forums. But they are expensive, and they really do expect that you will have a pretty decent HOTAS with lots of buttons to get the most out of them. Now, if this is your first buy, then you can get one of the modern jets at a great price. HOTAS may be more of an issue, but if you can solve it, then I think this is still where you want to be. If financial consideration is your primary concern, then for heaven's sake, go for the A4. There is absolutely no lower barrier to learning to love DCS than flying the A4. Hands down, point final, go for it and try it today. It will not cost you anything to find out. On the other hand, if, on the other hand, you are the kind of hybrid, another kind of hybrid, meaning that you're relatively experienced in both life and the fine art of flight simming, and you are really looking to just jump in with both feet for an online experience and a ready-made community, and if finances are not a primary concern, then I think you probably do want to go for a modern jet, the F-18 or the F-16. They're the fastest way into the world of DCS. You may find that you want to move on to something a little bit more particular, like the Harrier or the Viggen or the F-14 after that initial experience. And if you have the financial resources to do that, that won't be a bad choice. But I would start with the F-18 or F-16. I do go with that recommendation. Okay, that is pretty much my summary of where to start to get started in DCS. Now, it really does depend on what you enjoy, what you're looking for, and frankly, what you can afford in terms of both time and money. In the end, though, it's a personal decision, and I wouldn't second-guess anyone's choice. As I said, this is one topic on which you will never fail to get advice, and some of it might even be good advice if you ask around. All right, but there is one thing that I want to say, final piece of advice, and really the last word on the subject is, if this is your first aircraft in DCS, buy one you really want to fly. Don't be afraid of anything that anybody else says about what you should want to fly. If you don't want to put the time into learning the aircraft, you're not going to. And if you do, you're going to spend the time that it takes. So at the end of the day, buy the aircraft you want. Don't listen to me or anybody else. That being said, if you want to continue the discussion or you want to add your own thoughts, feel free to drop by my Discord channel. I expect this to be a topic of some interest amongst the faithful. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon. It's going to be Sidekick, signing off.